One more hilarity now that I've suffered through, but got a good grade on my quiz. Take a little mini break, a little mini disbursement of the brain cell glucose, the brain metabolism of the glycogens. Anyway, I Googled homosexuality as an expression of cannabis-induced psychosis, causing the rape of kids and eating poop. Right? Because this is a common thing with marijuana junkies. They will consume their own feces often without being aware, but sometimes they are so stoned, they are so psychotically inebriated by marijuana, they will voluntarily eat their own poop. Like, oh, this looks good. So if your kids have like feces, on their lips or in their mouth or just on their breath or in their teeth, it's because they're smoking marijuana. A common practice amongst these junkies is something called boofing, where they take a hose, right? Because the same way secondhand marijuana causes a contact high, it's involuntary exposure slash forced drugging. The junkie will inhale the smoke. This is the combustion method of chemical extraction. When you put the fire to the plant, the chemical in the plant goes into the smoke. And so anyone who inhales the smoke gets the chemical into their bloodstream, not just the person lighting the fire. But their lungs and their cilia cannot absorb 100% or even 80% of the THC in the smoke. No matter they try to hold it in longer, like greedy little junkies, just, oh, I need every little molecule. And that's addiction, of course. But when this occurs and they exhale it, they realize they're wasting money, right? That's dollars in the smoke. And so they'll take a hose and shove it up their ass and then blow the smoke up their own ass through the hose. And it's like a marijuana enema, like a marijuana smoke enema. The THC bypasses the liver straight to the brain. And this has a cognitively handicapping effect where they forget which end is the brown end. And so they'll end up sucking their own poop while they're blowing smoke up their ass. Very common thing amongst junkies. And so Google, of course, did this very, I don't know if it's sinister or stupid. I think it's a combination of both. But they did this thing where it became like a woke dictator of morality and opinion. You're not allowed to think that way. You're not allowed to express that opinion. And me. And so it said, okay, first of all, like a woke, homosexual, homosexuality is not a mental illness, which I disagree with. But that really identified the fact, the inescapable fact, that the same Epstein Island client list, the same plutocracy, the same globalist elites, bankers, Wall Street, whatever, that are running the United States, that are controlling the government and controlling society and shaping society through finance and economic manipulation, social media, mass media control, etc. They're the ones behind gay marriage, gay acceptance, gay rights, and they're also behind marijuana, and they're also behind COVID, quarantine agenda, etc. Recently, I got a comment on Brighteon where I posted these videos, and a junkie was triggered by the fact that I was telling the truth about marijuana, the same way the Christian was triggered by the fact that I was pointing out how full of shit he was, right? These people are just allergic to the truth, apparently. Jesus junkies. And he's accused me of being like pro-vaccine and take my mRNA tablet or some retarded nonsense. And this, well, was a big contradiction with reality. But that's par for course with junkies, right? The whole point of their drug addiction is to escape reality. So their opinion merits no credibility because it's not grounded in reality. It's grounded in fantasy and fiction, etc. Imagination. And so I pointed out to him that during the COVID-19 quarantine, states like Seattle had joints for jabs. Now, only a moron or a liar would try to propose the idea that the same corrupt politicians and government that exploited and abused COVID for all these, agenda implementation aren't behind marijuana because there was a lot of marijuana legalization to help keep the masses dumb and controlled and compliant. The 6 foot distancing, and you're killing grandma if you go outside and all that stuff. Yeah, marijuana was a very effective tool for that. So if you look at California, for example, so California had the vote for gay marriage, Proposition 8 or something like that, and the majority of the vote was against gay marriage, and the government just ignored the vote and legalized gay marriage anyway. For a state to legalize gay marriage, for a state to legalize marijuana, because homosexuality is an expression of cannabis-induced psychosis, right? Especially same-sex pedophilia. And this is why you see a lot of that stuff in California and increasing rates in other states that have legalized marijuana. The acceleration of child sex abuse is so prevalent that there's a lot of legalistic adjustments and new laws being created, new legislative debates occurring out of can stoned people consent, and etc. So after Google trying to lecture me on morals about how homosexuality is not an expression of mental illness, which is not true. But I guess Google's just like, oh, the more I repeat the lies, the more eventually the masses will accept it as true. And the masses being mentally handicapped by marijuana and pornography, etc., they just go along with it. Yeah, it's not mental illness at all. It's totally sane. Anyway, I then noticed that it avoided the concept of eating poop, right? So, because it also said homosexuality and pedophilia are not connected, which is obviously not true. So then I decided to rephrase the search terms into the prompt, and I simply asked it to provide cases of cannabis induced psychosis causing feces consumption. Sure enough, there are documented cases. Now, the ones provided in Google are not all the cases that are out there. There have been sanitariums, mental institutions and asylums in the United States for a very long time, and undoubtedly there's a lot of case files that have this sort of stuff of someone in cannabis-induced psychosis eating their own feces. But Google did provide just one case, and they tried to claim it was synthetic cannabinoids, which is really stupid because the whole point of synthetic cannabinoids is it's supposed to mimic the same neurochemical effect as authentic cannabinoids. So the same people behind the gay weed agenda are also using Google to suppress the data, like a data choke point, for the factual information that's really out there. But this does mean that there have been people that have smoked weed and eaten their own poop without the homosexuality. But it the absence of data provided by this nefarious, sinister Google AI manipulation. Are the billionaires just using AI to like wrangle the goyim? Like AI is running the masses for the billionaires? I think so. But it didn't say, okay, well, here's a case where cannabis induced psychosis caused homosexuality in the absence of poop eating. So it's very likely that all the cannabis induced psychosis homosexuals that, rape kids and eat poop, they're very rarely just raping the kids without eating the poop.